The realization that you will be spending the remainder of your life in prison, or at least a significant portion of your best years, is undoubtedly a devastating experience. While it is true that a life sentence is often the result of committing a serious crime, not everyone who receives this sentence copes with it in the same way. Even though the severity of the punishment may be warranted, the emotional and psychological toll of facing such a bleak future is not to be underestimated. Here are 10 convicts who freaked out after given a life sentence. Michael Marin. Michael Marin had fallen hard and could no longer afford mortgage payments. He planned to raffle his mansion off for charity, but that failed. So his next plan was to burn it down for insurance money. Once caught and put on trial, he soon learned that arson and insurance fraud was severe. At a minimum, he faced 7 years, but could serve 21 years. As a 53-year-old man, that was a life sentence. When the judge pronounced him guilty, Marin could be seen in court lifting his hands to his face. No one knew at the time that he wasn't just reacting in despair. He put a cyanide capsule in his mouth and then swallowed a drink. He began convulsing shortly after that and died in full view of everyone. Manson Bryant. It can't be a good trial when the person on the stand is named Manson. Manson Bryant was a career criminal who was convicted of robbery, kidnapping, and a 2018 armed robbery. At his sentencing, he spoke on his behalf about how he'd made many bad decisions, how drugs had been involved, and how he was trying to improve. He praised the entire justice system and thanked the court for its decision. Then the judge gave him 22 years and his tune changed. Bryant immediately flipped, cursing out the court and calling the judge a racist. He yelled and swore for an extended time, dropping numerous F-bombs. The judge gave him an additional 6 years for his trouble. Before proceeding further, please subscribe to the channel and click on the notification so you can get notified when we upload the next video. Diana Lovejoy. Diana Lovejoy, 45, was convicted for a murder-for-hire attempt against her estranged husband and received a sentence of 26 years in 2017. Fox 5 footage taken from inside the courtroom showed Lovejoy collapse in her chair as her verdict was read out by the judge. The attempted murder attack of her husband, Greg Mulvihill, took place in September 2016. As the court read out her punishments, Diana Lovejoy cried and fainted. Judge Sim von Kalinowski immediately ordered everyone to be escorted from the courtroom so that Diana could be given urgent medical attention. Medical assistance was quickly at the scene, and proceedings had to be adjourned to a later time. Paramedics attended the scene and took Lovejoy to the hospital as a precaution. The collapse delayed the reading of her accomplice, Weldon McDavid Jr., who was also found guilty of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. Mail Online reports McDavid was an instructor at a gun range, which is where he met Lovejoy. The pair are said to have formulated the plan to shoot Lovejoy's husband after it was deemed the couple would share joint custody of their son while she wanted sole custody. It was also reported Lovejoy had money difficulties and could not pay legal fees. Jeremy Christian. Jeremy Christian's sentencing got a rough start when the convicted killer kicked things off by telling a survivor that he should have killed her too. In 2017, he murdered 2 passengers on a train in Portland and tried to kill another. In total, he was found guilty of 12 offenses. When the victim said she hoped he'd go to hell and rot, he told her he'd see her there and then chanted George Floyd after cursing out the judge. "I do regret that 2 people died, but I don't regret the actions that led up to their deaths," Christian said. "It was not hate speech on the max. It may have been designed to show the knee-jerk reaction of liberals. It was designed to gain a reaction. Not to murder anyone, but to say that I have the right to free speech." Erica May Butts. Erica May Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham went to trial for killing a 3-year-old they were babysitting. While Cunningham pleaded guilty, Butts entered an Alford plea, which meant she maintained her innocence, but acknowledged that if she went to trial, she'd likely be convicted. The two probably expected some leniency, but found none when the judge gave them life in prison. As the judge read the sentence, Butts had a complete courtroom breakdown. She screamed, collapsed, and hyperventilated. In the meantime, Cunningham fainted and had to be wheeled out of the courtroom. Bryce Rhodes. Bryce Rhodes went on trial for a triple homicide, and from the start, he was an angry, erratic, and confusing defendant. Facing the death penalty or life in prison for his crimes, one would assume Rhodes would be distraught. However, he was anything but distraught. Rhodes interrupted the court proceedings with outbursts. He accused the judge of being in the KKK. At one point, Rhodes spits on a lawyer. He fired lawyers, said things that didn't make sense, and smiled at his victims' families mockingly. His lawyer argued that he needed a competency test, while the families of his victims insisted it was just a time-wasting ploy. Alan McCarty. Alan McCarty Jr. initially ended up in court over a child custody issue. Then he threatened to kill a judge. So, whatever, his initial problems became far worse. And that threat, along with threats against lawyers, including the unborn child of one, netted him a 20-year prison sentence. Hearing the bad news prompted McCarty to unsurprisingly lose his cool again. He cursed out the court, called the judge a liar, tossed out racial slurs, and had to be dragged out of the room. "What a bunch of fucking lies, you stupid piece of shit!" McCarty yelled at Foxman, who earlier threatened to duct tape McCarty's mouth for his disruptions during his trial. "You threatened my life. Fuck you." Foxman then ordered McCarty to be removed from the courtroom, but he kept yelling curses and racial slurs at the judge and an assistant state attorney. McCarty then spent the remainder of his sentencing hearing in another room where he watched the proceeding through one-way glass, the same location he spent much of his trial, according to the newspaper. Keith Ferguson. Sometimes when you've lost everything, all you have left at your disposal is to accept it with quiet grace. Or you could be like Keith Ferguson and throw a temper tantrum. He was convicted of killing his wife and her father and sentenced to life in prison with no parole. Ferguson refused to stand or raise his hand during the sentencing when asked. Instead, he swore at people and told the court he didn't care if they killed him. When he was finally taken from the room, he told everyone he'd seen them all in hell. Bass Webb. Bass Webb was serving time in prison when he caused more problems and had his sentence extended. He got 50 years for murdering his ex-girlfriend, and then, years later, he was sentenced to life for another murder. While Webb was in jail, he was charged with attempting to murder 2 jail employees. The judge in the trial had to recuse herself because she knew the victims. He replied by spitting at her. He got 37 more years attached to his sentence for the attempted murders and went to trial for spitting on the judge. What more could he lose, though? Dexter Johnson. The courtroom fell apart when Dexter Johnson was sentenced to death in 2007. Johnson, 31, was sentenced to death for his role in a double murder in 2006, days after he turned 18. Johnson and 4 other teens carjacked and robbed Maria Aparice, 23, and Hoingo, 17, while they sat in her car outside Ngo's house. According to court records, Johnson and the others took the young couple to a secluded area where Johnson raped Aparice before he and another teen shot them both, killing them. The murders were part of what Harris County prosecutors have described as a 25-day crime spree by Johnson and others that also included 3 other slayings. Johnson tossed a chair as he lashed out and had to be tackled by court officials, while others in the room screamed, passed out, and had to be taken away by ambulance. Johnson's execution stayed in 2019 as courts looked into claims of him having an intellectual disability. What are your thoughts about these criminals? Thanks for watching.